Well, hello everyone. I'm glad to see that you're here. I'm going to kind of be hanging out here just for a minute and try and get a link posted for the handout for today. So if you're with me here, just kind of hang tight and we'll get going in a minute or so. So that looks like a pretty long and lengthy link there. But I think that might take you to where you need to go. And so let me know. Hi, Linda. Glad to see you on here, and Jenny too. So we are a few minutes early here. Can one of you gals on there test that link and see if it works correctly? And if not, maybe put the right one on. I won't be able to be messing with that pretty soon because I'll be a little busy here, but I wanted to try and get that link posted right in the comments for you. Have had all kinds of issues with Facebook here today, and a little while ago was thinking I might even have to postpone because I couldn't even get into Facebook. So I don't know what's going on there. So I'm glad to see that you're coming on, and let me know if you get that handout printed off or check it out and see what we need to do. Just for your information, I did get it posted yesterday on one of my group pages in the classroom, but for some reason I was having a heck of a time today being able to put it on there. So Linda says it does not work. Oh, darn it. Well, if there's someone out there that can maybe post the correct link into the comments, then I'll be back in just a few minutes and check that out. So we are a couple of minutes in now, and I'm going to turn off this banner that's running across the bottom of the page. So Marianne is asking, did I post the link? And we've had issues with that. So if there's anyone here that has a link that they can copy in, Nan was on here last week and did that for me, and it was really helpful. So I don't know who might have it. I know several people have been able to get it. And we'll just see where we are. I am going to take a look at it here. I have the printout. So sorry, everybody, was kind of reading through that. That's a little rude, huh? I shouldn't do that. So let's go ahead and go over. I have the printout right here, and here's what I have, kind of my little cover for today's program. But this is actually what the information sheet looks like for you. And when you get that downloaded, this is what you're going to have. And so it is the live demo for August 5th for the bell templates and the winding way templates. What we have up here at the top, and we have some other information in further in, but this is a sample of what the sizes are. So the bell templates are really kind of cool. We have multiple templates and different sizes. The large one is 7.5 inches tall and 8 inches down at the bottom. So the width is at the very bottom because that is the widest point. 5.5 inches and 6 and 3.5 and 4. And then we have 2.5 and 3. And the little bitty guy at 1.5 and 2 inches. And we also have a handle, but that's not showing in here. Down here is one of the winding ways. So here right up here in the upper corner, you can see what the different templates look like. So there's different ways that you can acquire your templates, each one individually or these four as a set. Now we have the three sizes, but this one right here is the handles that work on those bells. The 5.5 and 7.5 has a handle built right into the template. But these templates were so small, I decided not to even do that, to build it in like I did down here, just because it kind of makes the template a little more awkward to work with in some situations. And I thought having all three of them together just in one template wasn't really too hard to do. So this is showing what our stitch pattern is, and then our handles, if you choose to use them, would go at the top. There's different designs and things you can use without putting the handles on, but if you wanted to have a nice little string of bells, then of course you might want the handles. And because the 5.5 and the 7.5 inch templates are so large, I decided to do it in a flip and stitch manner. So we would do 1/2 and flip the template and do the other half. And we'll take a closer look right at the templates in a little bit. Let me run back over here to the questions and see how we're doing. Looks like we have lots of responses there and trying out to get that handout. So this is an interesting design created down here. And this is by creating a rotated bell template pattern. And so we may not stitch that out today, but we're going to show you what some different samples are. This is how we could use one of the bells, and you could do this with any of the sizes. I actually did a little sample stitch out using the 3.5 inch bell, just because once we do our rotational pattern, we end up with a 7 inch in diameter design. And so, you know, the bigger the template, the bigger the design. This is what it would look like, but you couldn't really guess until you start analyzing that a little bit more that it was actually with the bell template. And so this is marking for 4 rotations. We have 2 lines in a cross pattern, whether it is an X or a cross, doesn't matter. And then it's rotated from the point outer edge of the bell. And so that's why we get that pretty little arc up at the top. When we flip and go the other way, then we get some other interesting lines in there. We have the instructions here on how to do that. Then down here in this lower part, it's how we could actually just stitch out a little swag and use the curves of a larger size in order to create our loopy ribbon that we would hang our bells with the handle on. This is the same basic pattern as what we saw on the first page, but it has a few more markings and twists and turns in it. So it isn't any harder. It just has a few more rotations. But I really like that intricate little filigree type inside with that ribbon effect that works on the outside. What I probably should have done was show you how this looks on a larger pattern, which is really quite pretty. And this is something I could see doing across the center of a table runner or something like that. And then we have our winding way templates. We have the 3 small sizes, and these are half templates, meaning we stitch 1/2 of it, spin the template around and do the other half, and then it puts us in position to spin it back So we would start here and do A to B, spin the template and go B to A, spin the template and A to B. So we do the upper part and then the lower, upper, lower, upper, lower. And as you work your way across, then you create the same design as when you're using the 5 by 5 inch size, but you're able to get a little 2-inch, 3-inch, or 4-inch winding way pattern. These work really well in a border or even in a smaller area where you don't want such big open spaces like what you get in the winding way. Here I have, let's pull this over. This is my stitched pattern, and this is using the 5-inch, but you can see it has a real nice open area. So you could come back and overlay that again if you wanted to create a channel through here or some kind of echoing in that, and really do all kinds of fun stuff. I haven't had time really to do that, but something I've always wanted to do, where we just offset the template a little bit and create an echo using the same template. So the smaller sizes creates that same kind of look. It's just done on a smaller scale. One thing that I want to explain, and I'm looking here, I don't see where we have it in the instructions for that. Maybe it's over here. So let's go on and then I'll catch up to myself. Here we have the easy continuous row pattern where we just work ourselves across. Here's our A to B and around B and so on. This is using the 5-inch template. And so we looked at on the other page how we do half of it, spin the template and do the other half. That's why we can get the same look on a smaller scale. When we are coming down here to start our second row going back across, I didn't ever put that in the instructions of how much space to have or allow in here. And that's really because it's just simply your choice. If you want to have your next row come right up and touch right along here, then you would use the distance of your template, which is 5 inches from top to bottom, and that would be your spacing distance from center to center would be 5 inches right here. And so if you want to have your second row come right back along and kiss that bottom of your first row, then 5 inches is the measurement you would use. I like to have anywhere from at least a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch space, so that would be 5 inches plus your clearance area, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, even an inch, added to the height of the template, which is 5 inches. So we'd be 5 1/4, 5 1/2, 6 inches, whatever. That number just gets added to the template size. Same goes with our smaller ones over here. If we are using our 3-inch template, for example, then we're going to be 3 inches from top to bottom. And our second row, we would want to be 3 inches plus our clearance. So on these littler ones, you know, probably a 1/2 inch would be the most I'd want to allow in there. A 1/4 inch space is kind of nice. What I like to do is take a look at how close these come in here. Or if we look at this one, the distance between the two right here, it's about a 1/2 inch, not quite a 1/2 inch. So that's why I say anywhere from a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch between your rows is going to look nice. And it's not really going to look like an exact embroidery design. It's going to just fill and flow nicely across the pages. So let me go over and take a quick look at our comments and see where we are with that. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to switch the cameras around so we can do some sewing. Everybody still with me? So we have quite a few people already have the winding way templates, but only a very few have actually gotten the bell templates yet. So I thought we might start out by stitching some of the bells and see how they work. They're pretty easy. They're kind of fun, and this time of year when we start thinking about the holidays coming up and all the different kind of things. But I wanted to show you in the booklet how you can do some other things other than just holiday bells. And so I have a couple of different ones. And so we have Patricia is now saying that she's working on has a quilt pinned. Let's see what she's saying here. So she's wanting to know whether she would start at the top or in the center. And I am thinking you must be referring to the winding way templates. And honestly, with those templates, it doesn't really matter where you start. You can start at the top, the bottom, and work the other direction, or you can start in the middle, determine where your center is, and I would probably, then you would go from that center. What I was thinking here is stitch your center line first, and then whatever distance you want between your rows would be your next row clearance, and work your way in the opposite direction to the top or to the bottom. Once you have finished the lower half or the upper half, rotate it around, come back to that center row that you did first, and then whatever your spacing distance is, then work that direction. It'd be the same way, you'd only have half of your quilt already quilted and not there. So I don't know if that helps you, Patricia. I hope so. It's kind of an easy way to do it. Anytime we have some of these edge-to-edge patterns, we can almost always start in the center if that's your desire and work toward the bottom or the top. Another thing I have found with a lot of these templates is that once you have decided where your horizontal center is, and then place your mark. Now here I have just dashed lines coming across as my center line because I didn't want a full marked line across there. I just know that's what it is. If you have a pieced quilt, you might even have a seam line out across there that you could use and wouldn't have to even do any marking. Trying to find out here what some of these comments are, and so I don't want to spend the extra time for that. So what I'm going to show you here is how we would be stitching with our bell template. Sorry, I bumped the camera, made it jiggle around here. And so in doing that, we could do the same thing. You could do your row across in one direction, drop down and do your next row and whatever size. What's kind of cool with the bells is all the shapes are the same. They are different in sizes, but the ratio of size is the same shape. So if you're using the little bitty guy, it's still going to be the same shape as even the bigger one. So I kind of like to try and have some consistency in some of that. And one thing I started to tell you, though, before I got sidetracked back on that, once I've marked my horizontal line, I have found that frequently when you're working on a bigger quilt, it's almost easier to go in a vertical direction. And we are so accustomed to sewing this way, front to back, as we're moving our seam line along. And so our quilting can work in the very same way. It's still horizontal on our quilt, but we stitch it vertically. One thing about doing that is it helps us to be able to see where that center line is, and for our alignment purposes, it's a lot easier that way, but it's purely optional. Whichever one works for you is the one to do. Before we get started with that, let's take a look at the templates themselves. So here we have, see if I can get them all on my little piece here so you can see them. Here is the little one, 1.5 by 2 inches, and then 2.5 by 3 and 3.5 by 4. This template here is the handles or the tops. I just thought handles made more sense because, you know, if we're going to be ringing our bells, we've got to have some way to hang on to them. And so here are those 4 templates, 3 sizes, 4 templates. And then we have our 2 bigger ones that look like they're giant, but they're really not that hard to use because they're narrow. And so with these, we would start at the bottom or the top and stitch down, flip the template over, reposition, and come back on around up to our top edge. And so we'll actually stitch this one out just so you can see how it works. Here's our center line that we would use for reference. We also have vertical lines, and I have staple tape on there, so I don't know how well that's going to show up. We have our vertical center line here and right here, but this cut edge of the template is also our vertical center. And so we have a horizontal center. What's kind of cool, once we've stitched our bell shape, then we leave our needle in place right there at center, and we position our handle right on top in that location. You can see here is the etch line of where the handle would get stitched. And here you can see the etch line of the top of the bell for alignment. And our bottom edges, now it isn't straight across the bottom. It is a curved bottom that goes down a little bit lower. So here we have the bottom edge of of the side, but it's not the absolute bottom edge, which is over here. So as we are coming along, if you wanted to align these within a particular border size, this is the 5.5 template, and it would fit nicely in a 6. But you wouldn't line this line up necessarily. You might, but you might want to be a little bit above. So let's move these, and then we'll do some stitching. These are really quite easy to use. They look kind of big. Like I said, this one here stitches a 7.5-inch bell. But you know, when you stop and think about it, that's kind of big. But if it was in the middle of a centerpiece or something like that, you could use this as framework for some template. You could even come back and put another bell inside there, and you can see how they fit together So you could create your own little framework in there, however you wanted to position it. And this isn't really a complete way of how it works. It's just an idea of that part of it. Let's see, I marked out and see if I can remember which size we were going to do. Let's maybe go with the 2.5-inch bell, just so we don't run out of room. So this here is what our template looks like. I'm going to go ahead and start at the top. It honestly doesn't matter, because what we're going to do is progress across. Actually, let's go down. Let's go this way. There's so many different ways these things can twist and turn, and it's really kind of fun. You're not really limited, and I'm only using the horizontal line here just as a reference guide. So here I've changed fabrics, could you tell? And I did that because I have an upper line marked up here. This is marked for a 3-inch space actually, but I wanted to show you what happens on there. Our stitching will actually be down below it. And so this will kind of help a little bit, I'm thinking, in determining where your placement might be. So this is really just kind of a fun little template. You could do them lots of different ways. Let me see if I can get over here and do this without bumping the camera again. Looks like I get to come over the top. So I'm going to start down here in the lower corner because I can get to it. There is just a little bit of backtracking so we can travel to the next location if you want to put them in a row. And we're going to try and do that here today. Notice I said try. I may have to move this camera. I can't quite get to my template. So we're going to go all the way around. A couple of stitches real close right there in the beginning. So here is just our simple shape. I'm going to take the template out and turn this around just so you can see it. Now I haven't added the handle on there yet. And so here's basically how it stitches out. You can see that it's just a topless bell. And you know, that's fine. There's some applications where that's all we want. Now we'll come right back in. We're in that corner. Come right back in, and I'm going to come around the bottom. Now here's where we want to be real careful. I'm going to have my little corners touch. You might not do that where you're exactly bell to bell. You might want to have a little space in between. It depends on where you're using them and how you're doing it. Without taking my hands off the template, I'm going to stitch right back up here and stop where my arrow is on the template with my needle. That's going to bold up my edge just a little bit. My needle is in line with that mark, and now I'm going to get my handle, and we're using right here the 2.5 inch template, so I want to use the 2.5 inch handle top. Insert that, and now I have my etched lines of the stitched bell that I position the handle onto. I'm going to make that line a little bit bolder. And then I'm going to come along the inside part. There's just a little bit of room in between where you can have a single row of stitching or a second row that actually adds a little bit of shaped edge to your bell handle. Back into position. Now we're at this second arrow over here, and we're going to use our spacing gauge. We love that spacing gauge, and be able to reposition the template and come right back down here to this corner. And now we're ready to move across for our second bell. And I'm only going to do it as we did our first one without a handle. Normally, I don't think you would have to reposition your hands this much. I'm just having to try and keep clear of bumping the camera with my arm. So we could come right back along that bottom edge again, or around the top. So let's see what happens when we get over here now if we were to put, well, let's just go back to center on that. Let's take a look here. See if we can get right back to center. And we know center because the middle of our thread slot is also the bottom, our vertical center at the bottom. So right about there. Now we can come in here with a smaller size. And we'll just put one inside the other to see how that stitches out. So it's going to fit a little differently because we're right at that bottom edge. So let's turn it around just so we can see how that looks. Now, we are not going to necessarily travel exactly on our bottom edge line, but we might. It depends on where you have your template positioned, whether or not you are right along that bottom edge. So this might not be something you want to do on all your bell shapes. Let's just go a little bit and then cut that thread. But it gives you an idea here if you wanted to do a little bit of kind of self-echoing and even maybe come back in with some template and cut away parts of that. This is how you could do it. You could even bring in your bigger one and do the same thing up there. But this is mostly to show you how they do fit inside each other. So the bells are kind of fun to play with. Let me take a quick look here. A commercial break, how's that? Not really. I'm going to do a comment break and kind of scan through and see if there's anything that I need to take a look at. Oh, well, thank you, Nan. She says that I do a great job with that camera right in front of me. It's a little tricky looking around it sometimes, but I want you to have the best view that's possible, and that's the only way I can do it. So it looks like we have lots of folks on here from all over, and that's really great. I love to see where you're coming from and even what the time frame is that you have. I know that, you know, for me, I am 2 o'clock Arizona time, which is right now this time of year. It's also 2 o'clock Pacific time. But there's some folks that are also on Mountain Time that are an hour ahead of me. So it's kind of crazy figuring it out. And then we've got the East Coast and Central Time and Australia time and UK time, and it's kind of crazy, but it's a lot of fun to see how all of that works out. So this is the bell templates, and we'll see how we're doing. I don't know, is anybody interested in seeing how they spin around? I think you can figure that out from the images that you have. What I would rather show you maybe is how we would do the larger template. So what I will do is mark a vertical line right here, maybe, just so I can know where to align my top and bottom after I flip it. And I wouldn't really even mark a full line. I'm going to now, maybe, if it'll show, so we can see it together. This is the 5.5-inch template. I have stable tape on both the top and the bottom. And because it covers kind of a large area, I have several pieces. Part of it, you know, when I'm first testing some of these, I have a tendency to add more stable tape just to make sure that it doesn't move around or anything on me while I'm working with it. And then once in a while, I find I have to add more to it because there isn't anything right there to grip with. So here's the bottom edge of this template, and I have some there just so I can hold it down with my finger, and then down at the bottom here too. So that's kind of a long span, and I needed several pieces on this side just to kind of do the same thing. So I want to have my stable tape kind of grip into the fabric. If we just have little tiny pieces out on the outer corner, it's not enough to really get a hold of that fabric. I'm going to turn this upside down so you can see what we're doing. Again, I bumped that camera. I'm so sorry. I'm going to start at the bottom center, bring my thread up, and go back down, get underneath that template a little bit. Now, when I do that, I always have to make sure that I'm still lined up here at the top. So I'm going to do a couple stitches just so I can let go of those threads. Now that bobbin thread, if you don't start out with it underneath your template or your foot, it will end up there. But I like to go not too far away just so it doesn't hang up and pull. If you've ever not started and not put it underneath your foot, and had an issue with it coming apart after you start sewing. Sometimes that might be why. So we have a bigger span here, so you can go a little bit faster here. I'm not real big on quilting at 120 miles an hour. I have a tendency to keep my template in place and want to have my foot touching the edge of the template. And so going a little slower or making frequent stops is okay with me. If you get out of alignment, just reposition. And you want to stop right on that center line. Our template, we flip it over. We should put the handle in. Actually, let's do that. Let's do the handle first. Put it right in position. Don't lower your foot on it. Now, let me turn this around. Make sure you can see. On this template, we have etch lines right in here. That is the top of our stitching. Obviously, we haven't stitched both sides of the bell yet, so we're only going to have a top edge on one side, but we slide the template up in there. You know, this isn't going to work because I went too far. Let me put a pause on that part. We're going to come back and I have to back up a little bit. We see here our etched handle. If we go too far past that, then we're not going to be able to fit into our stitching. So this would basically be where our arrows were on the small one. I need to back up a little bit. So you go to center and then stop where that needle is right in line. Now, when I put it in place, it will come up to where it needs to be. My center line will be on our marked line. If it doesn't, and we need to come over another stitch, it's easy to do. Position our curve right on our etch line, and then right here, and our center line up at the top on our marked line. Now we're in the right direction. Okay. So if you wanted to do your bell as if you're hanging on the swag, then this is how we would progress around it. Let's get back into position so we can go back to our center top. Now, this really is not as much backtracking as you might think. We only have a few stitches there. Flip the template over. Put it back in the hook. Line up our bottom vertical line on our marked line. We're tight in the hook up here, so we know that's in the right spot. And now we can complete our bell on the right side, meaning the right edge. So this is a real fun size. I could see this being completed around the edge of some applique parts with our little people having their names, first birth dates embroidered into the middle part, and just all kinds of things. It's a nice size template for use in lots of different situations. I'm just gonna kind of tie that off and cut my thread so we can move the template out of the way. So this is our 5.5 inch bell, and I made more work of it than what it really is, only because I stitched all the way to the center and then did not stitch backwards to where this marked line is here. We need to have our template, the center there, but we need to have our needle stop where that would meet. So let me take a quick look and see if we have any questions, and then we're going to move on to the winding ways. So it looks like we're doing okay. I don't really see too many questions. So let's take a look at how the winding way templates work. I think that I'm going to show you how the small sizes stitch, because we do some flipping back and forth on that. It's a little more involved, only that you have to turn it, but it really works the very same way. I only have staple tape on one side because I will stitch from one edge to the other and spin the template and realign my center line right here as I go. I had, when I was designing these templates, the bell templates, what I kept thinking about was the handbell choirs that we so frequently hear at Christmas time, with all of the different sounds and tones of the bells. I always thought those were so pretty, and I liked the shape of them too, and all the different sizes twinkling in the lights as the bells were being played by the children at the Christmas time. Once I started playing with the templates, then I realized, oh my goodness, these could work really nice with holly leaf templates too. And so there's just all kinds of fun things. They're not necessarily Christmas only, but that's one time that we do see a lot of different bell shapes. So this particular combination, the smaller sizes of the winding way templates, do not have the full solid channel that the foot stays in, but we stay right up against that outer edge. Now here's an example of why I should probably have more staple tape on it, because I'm having to reach a long ways to get to it. It makes it a little bit more challenging. Once we get to B and stop, we're right back at our center line, and we spin the template, keep it at B, and it's going to go back the other direction, but that's okay. That's what we want. We'll line up right down here on our marked line, keep the foot in the hook, and then we're going to keep going. There are etch lines on here as guidelines. They are not absolute, because our fabric is woven and it can move easily. So these are just guidelines to help you stay close to where you need to be. And as we travel back along the edge of that template, we'll now come right back into A again and be on our center line. Spin it around, stay at A, and we're ready to go. You may notice, I'm using some low shank templates here. This works the very same way whether you have low shank, high shank, or even the long arm. They're just a little bit thicker. So you want to use whichever one is most suited to your machine. You know, if you have a hard time hanging on to the template without it sliding around, maybe try a pair of gloves. I don't have any on here today, and I can tell in using the template. Another little piece of staple tape, even right here, would help to kind of keep it in position. It has a tendency to want to move, and it's probably because I'm having to lean off out of way to get to it. But how often do we see that our meandering pattern is 100% exact in every stitch time? So if we were doing free motion, it probably wouldn't be quite as exact as what this is. So even if you get away from the edge of the foot just a little bit, or you're off from your center line, it's not going to be a problem. Here you can see what I was talking about in the vertical position. I'm able to quilt in the same type of direction that I would be sewing. I like doing it like that. This way we can see the pattern a little more as it forms, but we're going to have over up under the throat of our machine, we're going to have a lot of fabric bunched up in underneath there that we then have to try to move across, or if we're going the other way, it's going to build up in here, where when we're working in a vertical pattern, then we're going front to back, and we have a little bit more space as a rule to just keep it flatter and go in that direction. So if that works for you, great. It does work for me. And I've had a lot of folks ask, how do you do to keep it not all get bunched up? And this is what I do. When I'm working with a bigger quilt, of course, you're going to have it puddled up. But for these edge-to-edge patterns where you're doing the whole quilt all the way across, you're going to have an area that is more flat than the rest of it, and that's the part you're going to be working. When you get ready to move your template down, you'll flatten out another section and work in that. So I'm really close to this outer edge over here, and I'm not going to be able to do that whole pattern. But let's just see where we go. I always like to have a little bit of extra margin outside my block or outside my quilted area that gets trimmed away. If I have a border on this edge and I'm doing edge to edge within the borders, then you're going to have a seam. Now let's just pretend we have one right down here. So at this location, we're not going to be able to come back to center because this is as far as we would go. This is the point where we would then stitch in the ditch down to our next starting point. This is the 3-inch or 4-inch template. So we have our center line here, and we want 4 inches from this center line to our next center line, plus let's add 1/4 of an inch in between. And I left my marking pen over on the other table. So it's going to be a little more difficult to mark that well. So we're going to go 4 1/4 inches. You can see right here is my marked line, and this will be my new center line down here. Let's put that line, because I'm using just a ruler. If I had used my basic marker, this would have already been done, and it's a piece of cake because then you know they're all accurate. and position where they need to go. So let's just mark a little bit of distance there. But you can use a ruler. I always find it to be a little harder to do. So let's take a look and see what happens. Here is our center. I like to kind of offset my pattern with these. Looking at our first row, we can see we have 3 full patterns coming across there, not quite full, but if we turn the template like this, you can see how that goes. So here would be center, and here would be the starting point. So if we were to offset by half, this is what I'm talking about. And then that way, we're not exactly right on top. We don't have exactly that row. They fit in between. And so we just have a little bit more pleasing look. You can see here by the placement of the template how that would create a big area there and real close here. By coming in halfway, then we have a little bit less of that. It fits together a little better. Another thing, when we're using that 1/4 inch, if we have the outer edge of our, or the inside edge of our template does not go past that stitch line, we know we're going to have at least 1/4 of an inch away. So let's figure out, that would have been A, where we stopped up here. I think sometimes when I'm trying to explain this to you that I'm actually causing more confusion because I'm talking through the how to do it part. What we want to do is stitch down a little ways so that we can get in line for our next piece of the pattern. And let's just come down. I don't know where we need to be. So here we have, this will work. Let's do this. So here we have our center right there. This is going to bring us way too close up to those stitches. So by coming on down a little farther and moving the template in a little bit, we can come up into that pattern. We need to make sure that our etch lines here do not pass over our stitches because we don't want to be that close to them. So let's just come on down a little farther in the ditch, and now we can bring our template in place. Because we can see that there's a little bit of a piece that's going to be formed over here in our ditch, I'm just going to stitch over, because this isn't going to be seen, it's in the ditch, and I'm going to come up there. Actually, it needs to be up here. This is my center line. Now I can come back and back up here and put my template in position where it needs to be. This is only slightly confusing when you're first doing this first row, getting it started. Once you have it going, then they're all the same after that. You'll know where to position it and how much to go. And of course, you could draw it out on paper first if you wanted to, but we didn't. So we are not going to do that one little first edge. We're actually doing this whole thing backwards. It will end up being a little more work to get it straight, but we can do it. Probably the easiest thing for you, unless you've had quite a bit of experience with the winding way templates, would be to get to that far right-hand side and break your threads and go back to the left and start your second row right where you wanted it to be, rather than what I'm doing here to work your way back across. And my marked line didn't go far enough down, so I'm not actually in line. But you can see how the pattern develops, and you can do it in a continuous stitch without breaking threads if you want to, but it might be a little bit easier if you go ahead and just start over, especially if you're working on a big quilt, because you're going to have plenty of room to do that. So I don't know where my line is supposed to be. So this is the part I was talking about. Because I didn't space it correctly when I first started over here, I'm way close together, more so than what these are. But honestly, it doesn't make that much of a difference because it's a meandering pattern anyway. The main thing you want to make sure of is that you don't cross over the top of any of these stitches, and we have adequate space in there by adding that 1/4 of an inch, that we aren't going to have that problem. So I'm going to run back through the questions real quick and see if there's anything I need to check on, and don't go away yet. So Janice is asking, how do you do the next row on the 5-inch? Well, Janice, that's actually easier because you're going to position your template, and you'll still add your 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch for your next center line, and you just kind of stitch down in the ditch to where you can line that template up, and then you come back across. So it's actually easier with the bigger template to do that second row coming back across. You don't have to flip and turn, you just spin and stitch. So I have, Lynn is also asking about the 5-inch template. We are kind of at our time frame. Do you want to just go ahead a couple minutes longer, and we won't do a whole row and come across, and I'll see if I can help clarify that? It's not hard to do. Let's see if I can just do that real quick. We're going to stitch over the top of our bells. So this is kind of a messy thing to do, but we're going to see if we can make it work. So our 5-inch template is really a fun one to use. Maybe we can turn this over and those bells in that other color won't show up quite so much. Let's mark or position our template so that we can get lined up here. What we're going to do, because we're stitching with white thread, even though we have other stitches on this piece of fabric, I think it might still work okay for you. We're going to start at A, I'll put my foot down right there, bring that thread up. We could probably do just an hour-long class just on the winding ways, it's looking like, huh? Okay, so I'm going to do one pattern here, and then we'll do the second row. So we're going to pretend that we're finishing up our first row. I like to move my fingers around and keep a finger on those peninsulas so they don't flip up. Because if they do flip up, you can kind of get off track a little bit. And of course, you don't want to run over your fingers. I don't know if this is going to help you guys or not, honestly, with this bell stitched on here. So here we are up at our stopping point. I'm going to take my template out so we can take a look at it. This is 5 inches from center to center. So right there where my needle is, 5 inches down would be where our next center would be. But we want to add a little bit of extra space. Let's see if we can do it like this. So 5 inches is right here. End of the ruler is 5 inches away. That would be center of our next row. But let's move it down 1/2 inch. Now I have 5.5 inches at the needle. So my center would be way down here. Let's mark a line over there and maybe it'll be straight across. And it's really best if you do this before you start quilting and it's not under the needle, because now I'm just kind of estimating where it needs to go. And I'm using the edge of the template here as my marking tool. So here's where my center is, way down here. If I wanted to get the template turned around the right way, be right on that center line, this is going to give me 1/2 inch in between my rows. And you can see how that would line up here. So we could, this is at B right there. I could mark down where B is. So now we need to go 1/4 inch over. Right about there should be the center of my next pattern. So there's a couple of different things you could do. You could stitch in the ditch down to that point and then put your template right in place and start and go from here. And that's probably the easiest way to do it. If you're looking for easy, then let's try that. So we will stitch in the ditch, and I'm using the edge of the template to help me do that. If I had a straightaway right here, that's the best way. So I'm now at center, which is B again, and I will slide the template back in place and line up on my marked line at B, or I could turn the template around and do it the opposite direction, meaning start at A again, but it still kind of comes out mostly the same. So if you are doing a quilt and you will be binding this outer edge, you're going to have a margin out there that gets cut off. And that's the easiest way. Then you just travel in that margin until you get around to where you need to be to start that second row. Stay lined up on your center line. You know, and do you have to mark the whole entire quilt? No. But having some reference lines out across there is a good idea, especially at the outer edges of what your spacing is, and then maybe an inch or two in between as you go. So you can see here how our pattern develops again, and we just work our way back, going across the other direction. Once you get down to A, then you spin the template around, line it up again with the rest of your marked line, and continue on. So I'm going to just quit right there so we can take a look at that. So please forgive me for doing this over the backside of some bells, but I think maybe that might give you an idea of how to complete one row, travel down your distance, position the template so you can start your second row and work your way back. So I hope that this was helpful to you. If not, then, you know, we'll have to figure out what we can do, because the whole point of all of this is to show you how the templates work, what you can do with them, and answer any questions. This is the next best thing to actually getting to have an in-person class. And so it's an almost like in-person. So this is the place where if you have questions, you can ask them. And I will do what I can to give you the information that you need. So this is Donna McCauley, and I'm in the DMQuilting studio right now. We're posting on Facebook So Steady page. I will go back through the comments and questions and see if there's anything that I need to respond to. So happy quilting, everyone. Thanks for stopping by this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you again. I will not be doing a demo class next week on Thursday, and we'll be posting a notice of when the next one will be after that. Hope you enjoy the winding way and the bell templates. Bye-bye.